In a quiet Florida suburb, a 62-year-old woman stunned her community when she walked down the aisle with a man less than half her age, just 26. Neighbors called it odd. Family called it love. But exactly 3 months after their whirlwind wedding, he vanished without a trace. No calls, no goodbyes, no signs of struggle. At first, it seemed like he simply walked away. But the truth lurking beneath their picture-perfect marriage would send shockwaves through investigators, revealing a chilling story of secrets, control, and betrayal no one saw coming. The story begins in Clearwater, Florida, where 62-year-old Darlene Whitmore had lived for over 3 decades. A retired insurance underwriter, Darlene was well known in her community for her conservative demeanor, meticulous lawn, and weekly church attendance. Widowed for nearly 10 years, she filled her days with volunteer work at a local animal shelter, gardening, and attending community events. Though financially stable and respected by neighbors, those closest to Darlene often describe her as lonely but proud, someone who missed companionship but wasn't actively seeking it. Everything changed when she met Tyrese Walton, a 26-year-old drifter originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Tyrese's background was checkered. Raised in foster care after losing both parents at a young age, he had bounced between low-paying jobs, struggling to find steady footing. He worked briefly as a line cook, a mechanic's assistant, and even tried his hand at freelance photography. Friends described him as charming, easygoing, and street-smart, but often restless, always moving from one city to the next. Darlene and Tyrese crossed paths online through a Facebook group dedicated to local Florida artists. Darlene had been browsing for someone to paint a mural on her backyard fence, and Tyrese had recently posted his artwork in the group. Their first meeting was supposed to be strictly business. But according to Darlene, their connection was instant and undeniable. Despite the glaring 36-year age gap, they continued seeing each other. Within weeks, Darlene was smitten. Tyrese moved into her home under the premise of helping around the house and starting fresh. The relationship quickly blossomed from companionship into a full-blown romance. They were seen together at the grocery store, local diners, and Sunday church service. Neighbors were stunned, but mostly kept their opinions to themselves. Some friends of Darlene expressed concern, questioning Tyrese's intentions, especially given his vagabond lifestyle and lack of employment. Darlene brushed them off, insisting that Tyrese was different, that he made her feel alive again. Tyrese, for his part, appeared affectionate and attentive in public. He praised Darlene on social media, calling her his rock and a blessing. In a short time, he had become a fixture in her world, helping her with errands, accompanying her to medical appointments, and even walking her elderly dog, Benny. When they announced their engagement just 2 months after meeting, the reaction was mixed. Darlene's adult children were skeptical. Her daughter reportedly refused to attend the wedding. Meanwhile, Tyrese's acquaintances in Atlanta were shocked to hear of his sudden transformation, from a man with no fixed address to a suburban husband living in a paid-off home. Still, the wedding went forward in a small backyard ceremony, attended by a few close friends, a pastor, and a hired photographer. For Darlene, it was a second chance at love. For Tyrese, it seemed like stability, opportunity, or perhaps something else entirely. But behind the smiles and the carefully posed wedding photos, subtle tensions were already beginning to brew, ones that would come into full focus after his mysterious disappearance just 3 months later. The wedding of 62-year-old Darlene Whitmore and 26-year-old Tyrese Walton took place on a sunny Saturday afternoon in late March at Darlene's modest but immaculately maintained home in Clearwater, Florida. The ceremony was held in her backyard, beneath a white rental canopy adorned with fake ivy and silk roses. A local pastor, who had officiated several funerals and baptisms in the neighborhood, performed the nuptials. There were less than 20 guests in attendance, mostly a handful of Darlene's church acquaintances and one of Tyrese's old friends who drove in from Tampa. Darlene wore a simple pale blue gown with pearl earrings, and Tyrese dressed in a navy suit he later admitted to borrowing. The ceremony was short, modest, and oddly quiet. A few plastic chairs set out for guests were left empty, most noticeably those reserved for Darlene's adult children. Her daughter and son had both declined to attend, citing personal disagreements about the relationship. Her daughter had been especially vocal, calling the relationship exploitative and a setup waiting to happen. Darlene, feeling wounded but defiant, pressed ahead without their blessing. The tone of the wedding was polite, but not particularly joyous. Guests offered their congratulations cautiously, some smiling out of obligation more than celebration. As one neighbor later recalled, "You didn't get the usual wedding warmth. It felt more like a polite gathering with an undercurrent of discomfort." Following the ceremony, light refreshments were served inside. Tea sandwiches, punch, and a basic sheet cake with "Forever Starts the Day" piped in blue icing. Tyrese spent much of the reception at Darlene's side, but several attendees noted how he often glanced at his phone and seemed disengaged. He made a toast short, vague, and filled with general sentiments about fresh starts and building a future. One woman who sat near him whispered later that his words sounded rehearsed and disconnected, almost as if he didn't know what to say to a room full of strangers who clearly doubted him. And there was doubt, plenty of it. Whispers had already begun to spread weeks before the wedding. Neighbors and longtime friends of Darlene were concerned not only about the glaring age difference, but also about how quickly the relationship had escalated. A man nearly 4 decades younger, with no stable job or family ties, suddenly moving in and marrying a retired homeowner? To many, it didn't add up. Rumors circulated quietly in church pews and grocery store aisles. Some speculated that Tyrese was after Darlene's house or her pension. Others believed he was using her as a stepping stone, laying low after some trouble back in Georgia. Darlene dismissed all of it as jealousy and small minds. She insisted that Tyrese loved her for who she was, and that their bond was real. Still, certain things gnawed at those who cared about her. One church friend, who asked not to be named, recalled seeing Tyrese snap at Darlene during a planning meeting for the reception. "It wasn't loud, but the tone was sharp," she said. "It felt off." Others noticed that Tyrese rarely drove, didn't seem to have a bank account, and avoided questions about employment. Darlene explained it away, claiming he was between gigs and focusing on art projects for the local community. But in private, even Darlene was growing uneasy. Just a few days after the wedding, a close friend confided that Darlene had mentioned Tyrese becoming more distant. She said he stayed up late, took long walks alone, and had mood swings. The friend revealed. She brushed it off, but I could tell she was confused, maybe even scared. The whispers, once merely background noise, were now slowly becoming more pointed and pervasive. And while Darlene kept up appearances, smiling at church, posting cheerful photos of home-cooked meals with Tyrese, those around her felt something wasn't right. Some even began to keep quiet tabs on her well-being, hoping their worst suspicions weren't about to come true. Just 3 months after the wedding, Tyrese vanished without a trace, and the whispers turned into something much darker. In the weeks following the wedding, Darlene Whitmore and Tyrese Walton appeared to be living the dream. Photos of beachside brunches, local resort stays, and his and hers matching outfits started showing up on Darlene's Facebook profile, most of them featuring Tyrese front and center. The couple posed in front of rented cars, holding fruity cocktails, and dining at places Darlene had never frequented before. Her captions gushed about new adventures with my king and finally living life right. To casual observers, their life looked joyful, maybe even enviable. But those who knew Darlene closely began to question the authenticity behind the filtered snapshots. For one, Darlene had never been one for extravagance. A retired administrative assistant, she lived frugally, clipping coupons, shopping secondhand, and budgeting carefully. Friends were shocked to see her suddenly flaunting spa days, designer handbags, and weekend getaways. It wasn't her, one longtime neighbor said. She was always proud of being practical. This version of her, it felt staged. Behind the scenes, things were changing rapidly, and not all for the better. Tyrese, once a passive presence, had started managing more of Darlene's day-to-day decisions. He began taking over her online accounts, claiming to help her with digital stuff. He handled grocery shopping, scheduled her appointments, and even spoke on her behalf during some phone calls. Friends said Darlene began deferring to him more often, even when it came to simple matters. Most concerning, however, were the changes in her finances. A close friend of Darlene's, who occasionally helped her balance her checkbook, noticed unusual withdrawals, larger sums than usual, multiple ATM visits in a week, and charges from online retailers that Darlene had never used before. When she asked about it, Darlene grew defensive, saying Tyrese was helping her enjoy life more and that she was tired of hoarding pennies. There was also quiet talk about a visit Darlene made to her attorney, supposedly to make updates to her estate plan. A paralegal at the office, who later shared the story anonymously, recalled Darlene asking questions about transferring property and adding someone to her will. Whether or not the changes were formalized remains unclear. But to many watching from the sidelines, one question lingered. Was Darlene truly in love, or had she become the victim of a carefully built illusion? As the honeymoon phase faded, cracks in Darlene and Tyrese's picture-perfect life began to show, though only to those paying close attention. Behind the smiling photos and affectionate captions, tension had begun to settle like dust in their once vibrant home. Darlene, once known for her cheerful disposition and steady temperament, became quieter, more withdrawn. Friends who visited noticed she no longer initiated conversations and often waited for Tyrese to speak first. Her weekly lunches with her church group became less frequent, and when she did attend, she seemed distracted, checking her phone often and sometimes excusing herself abruptly. Tyrese, on the other hand, had grown more assertive. What began as helpfulness soon looked like control. He started managing Darlene's schedule, deciding who could visit and when. Some neighbors said he intercepted phone calls or answered her messages, claiming she was resting or busy. It was like she had to ask for permission to breathe, one longtime friend remarked. The couple's arguments, while never loud enough to disturb the peace, were hinted at through short remarks and visible tension. A cousin of Darlene's recalled a family barbecue where Tyrese made a sharp comment about Darlene spending too much. She laughed it off, but her eyes said something else. He said, more alarming were the subtle power shifts. Darlene stopping mid-sentence when Tyrese in a room, or changing her answer if he disagreed. Family members started whispering about manipulation, maybe even emotional abuse, but no one felt they had enough proof to confront her directly. What was once hailed as a romantic whirlwind now looked, to those closest, like a storm slowly gaining strength. And beneath the surface, resentment, silent and growing, was starting to rise. It was a cool Thursday morning in late August when Tyrese Walton, just 3 months into his marriage to 62-year-old Darlene, vanished without a trace. That morning, according to Darlene, he left the house around 7:30 a.m., saying he had errands to run and a meeting with a friend about a potential business idea. He never returned. The last confirmed sighting of Tyrese came from a neighbor across the street who claimed to have seen him getting into a silver sedan that wasn't his. He wasn't carrying anything, just his phone, the neighbor noted. Didn't look rushed, just like he was heading somewhere ordinary. That was the last anyone saw of him. When Tyrese didn't come home that evening, Darlene said she assumed he'd gotten caught up somewhere. She didn't call or text him until well after midnight. She later told police, figuring he needed space. By the next morning, she began to grow concerned. But it wasn't until nearly 48 hours later that she officially filed a missing person report. Darlene's demeanor during those early days raised eyebrows. According to the responding officer, she was calm, almost attached, and offered little detail about Tyrese's recent behavior or whereabouts. She didn't reach out to his few local acquaintances, nor did she post publicly asking for help finding him. Friends and family began to whisper, why the delay in reporting? Why wasn't she more panicked? Some suspected she knew more than she let on. Others defended her, saying grief and shock can manifest in strange ways. Still, questions loomed large of a quiet neighborhood. Where did Tyrese go? Why would a young man just disappear days before finalizing paperwork to co-own his wife's home? And was his disappearance truly random or part of something far darker? When Darlene filed the missing persons report 2 days after Tyrese vanished, local law enforcement in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, responded with urgency, but also quiet suspicion. A healthy 26-year-old man disappearing without warning was rare, and the fact that he had no known mental health issues or history of going off-grid added to the concern. Officers conducted an initial wellness check at the couple's home. Everything appeared in order. No signs of a struggle, no packed bags left behind, and Tyrese's cell phone was untraceable, either turned off or destroyed. His car was still in the driveway. Investigators quickly issued a public alert and asked for anyone with information to come forward. As the search intensified, inconsistencies began to surface. Darlene had told detectives Tyrese left around 7:30 a.m. to meet a friend. But when pressed, she couldn't name the friend or provide contact information. She mentioned the silver sedan he entered, but claimed she had never seen it before. However, a neighbor later recalled seeing the same car parked outside their home on several occasions in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. Officers canvassed local businesses, hoping surveillance footage might reveal his last movements. Nothing turned up. No bank activity, no phone calls, no social media posts. It was as if Tyrese had simply evaporated. When questioned further, Darlene's responses became more vague. She alternated between saying Tyrese was under pressure lately and insisting he seemed totally normal. Investigators noted her lack of emotional urgency, even in private. As the days turned into weeks with no solid leads or physical evidence, police began to quietly expand their scope. They started looking not only for where Tyrese might be, but who might want him gone. And increasingly, their attention kept returning to the one person who saw him last, his wife. Weeks into the investigation, detectives stumbled upon a breakthrough, one that unraveled a carefully constructed image of a loving marriage and hinted at something far more calculated. A routine inquiry into Tyrese's financial activity turned up nothing. But when law enforcement obtained a subpoena for Darlene Whitaker's banking records, the picture changed dramatically. In the weeks leading up to Tyrese's disappearance, Darlene had made several large transfers, over $50,000, to an offshore account under name no one recognized. Further inspection revealed newly drafted estate documents naming Darlene's nephew, not Tyrese, as the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy. Curiously, those documents had been signed just a month before the wedding. Then came the surveillance footage. A gas station security camera captured a familiar silver sedan, the same one seen near their home, pulling into a remote bayou trail the night before Tyrese vanished. The footage was grainy, but the driver appeared to be Darlene herself. Even more damning was what was found in a nearby dumpster a few days later. A torn duffel bag containing a blood-stained shirt, later confirmed through DNA to belong to Tyrese. But the biggest revelation came from a friend of Tyrese's who finally came forward. She had received a series of encrypted messages from him days before he disappeared. In them, Tyrese confessed he felt trapped in the marriage, that things weren't what they seemed, and that he feared Darlene was hiding something dangerous. With this new evidence, the investigation pivoted sharply. What began as a baffling missing persons case now had the trappings of financial fraud, deceit, and possibly premeditated foul play. And for detectives, the focus narrowed to one chilling possibility, that Darlene hadn't just lost her husband. She may have made him disappear. Following the disturbing evidence uncovered, offshore transfers, DNA-matched clothing, and the cryptic messages Tyrese sent before vanishing, police moved swiftly to confront Darlene Whitaker. She was brought in for questioning at her suburban Georgia home, where she remained eerily composed. When asked directly about the financial discrepancies in the bloody clothing, she denied any wrongdoing, claiming Tyrese had a history of running off and that the marriage had begun to sour after he became moody and ungrateful. But investigators weren't buying it. Darlene's demeanor, cold, detached, and at times dismissive, raised red flags, especially when she admitted to burning Tyrese's personal belongings a few days after he went missing. "I didn't think he was coming back," she explained. "I wanted to move on." That statement, paired with her financial maneuvers and presence near the Bayou Trail, was enough for prosecutors to take the case forward. Though there was still no body, Darlene was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, financial fraud, and suspicion of involvement in a potential homicide. The community was stunned. Many who once admired the couple's bold love story now watched as Darlene was let out her home in handcuffs. The case moved to trial the following year, without a body. Proving murder was difficult, but the circumstantial evidence was damning. Her defense argued that Tyrese had likely fled the relationship, overwhelmed by public scrutiny and financial expectations. The prosecution countered with the timeline, the blood-stained duffel, and Darlene's pattern of manipulation. In the end, Darlene was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and obstruction, but not murder. The jury remained divided on whether she had killed Tyrese. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The disappearance remains officially unsolved. Tyrese Daniels is still missing, and the truth of what happened to him may be buried forever. In the months following Darlene's conviction, the emotional ripple effects were felt deeply across both families. Tyrese's mother, Lachelle, appeared on local news channels pleading for closure, still clinging to hope that her son was alive somewhere. "No one just vanishes," she said through tears. "Someone knows what happened, and I will not stop until I have answers." Tyrese's siblings launched a social media campaign called #Where'sTyrese, which gained modest traction but ultimately yielded no new leads. For Darlene's relatives, the trial brought shame and disbelief. Her younger sister described the situation as a nightmare no one saw coming. Many in her church community, once supportive of the marriage, began distancing themselves, whispering about Darlene's motives and her obsession with control. Some viewed her as a heartbroken woman betrayed by a younger man. Others saw her as a master manipulator who engineered the relationship for her own gain. Media outlets nationwide picked up the story, turning it into a tabloid headline. "Bride twice his age, groom missing, millions vanished." The sensational nature of the case, the age gap, and the luxury lifestyle made it a favorite topic for true crime podcasts and talk shows. Yet, despite the coverage and courtroom revelations, one question lingered in every conversation. Was this truly a love story gone wrong, or was it never about love at all? There were no love letters found, no heartfelt voicemails, no signs of true intimacy behind the filtered Instagram posts. Friends of Tyrese later admitted they always felt he was just going along with it, that something in his smile never quite reached his eyes. And so, with a prison sentence served but no body recovered, the case remained steeped in shadows. The truth, it seems, disappeared the same day Tyrese did.